You may have heard the old saying, there's nothing truly new under the sun. Well, to some extent, it's true. But have you ever seen a woman who can draw patterns directly onto her skin without ink? Or a man carrying a tumor that weighed more than 240 pounds? And how about someone calmly putting the head of a 12-foot python inside her mouth while having a drink? Get ready, because these people are so strange and hard to explain that seeing them may still not feel like enough proof. And trust us, the last one on this list will leave you totally speechless. Number 15. Alexandra Torregosa Siang, being in her 20s, has never stopped strangers from asking Alexandra a question that must have grown exhausting. How old are you really? The young Filipina has a small frame, youthful features, and a high-pitched voice that often leads people to mistake her for a schoolchild. Behind that appearance is Langerhans cell histiocytosis, a rare disease reported to have affected her pituitary gland, hypothalamus, and the hormones responsible for normal growth. Childhood brought medical appointments and treatment, while school added teasing that once made Alexandra reluctant to return. Social media later introduced another kind of scrutiny, with strangers accusing her of editing photographs or lying about her age. She has even carried identification to settle doubts in public, but curiosity from others tells only a fraction of her life. Alexandra enjoys fashion, singing, music, photography, and making videos, with hopes of modeling someday. She wants the same thing any adult deserves, to be seen on her own terms. Number 14. Juliana F. Flowers. Juliana learned very young that sunlight could hurt her in ways most of us would never expect. The Brazilian girl was diagnosed with xeroderma pigmentosum, leaving her body unable to properly repair damage caused by ultraviolet radiation. Going outside during daylight meant covering herself with protective clothing, glasses, a hat, and sunscreen, while much of her routine gradually shifted toward nighttime. But avoiding the sun was only part of what awaited her. New skin lesions continued appearing, bringing repeated biopsies, childhood chemotherapy, and eventually at least 300 operations to remove tumors across her body. Years of treatment also changed her facial structure and damaged her vision. School brought another battle, as Juliana started late and endured cruel remarks about her looks. She kept going anyway, finished high school, and later began sharing her experience online. Through those posts, she helps other families understand XP while refusing to let prejudice decide how she lives. Number 13. Yang Jonbin. We complain when our back aches for an afternoon or when something feels uncomfortable for a few hours. Then there was Yang, who carried a huge tumor for 25 years. The trouble began with what appeared to be a small mark on his lower back. By 9, it had started growing, and although surgeons removed it when he was 12, the mass returned with frightening determination. Eventually, Yang could barely leave his bed. At 37, the tumor weighed 242 pounds, making it heavier than plenty of fully grown adults. Removing something that size was hardly routine surgery. In Beijing, 9 doctors spent 16 hours separating the massive growth from Yang's body, while more than 5 liters of blood were needed during the operation. Chief surgeon Chen Minliang described it as the largest nerve tumor his team had encountered. Yang survived. After decades spent carrying an almost unimaginable burden, simply sitting comfortably and moving again became freedoms worth more than anyone around him could measure. Number 12. Amar Samad. 10 years is an awfully long time to watch something grow on your own face, without knowing when help will finally arrive. By 19, Samad of Jharkhand had spent roughly half his life with an ossifying fibroma spreading from his upper jaw. The mass became almost soccer ball-sized and weighed around 4.8 kilograms, leaving eating, speaking, and meeting other people increasingly difficult. Although benign, its enormous size badly distorted his facial structure and pushed him toward years of isolation. Eventually, Samad reached Amrita Hospital in Kochi, where specialists faced a case few medical teams had ever encountered. 12 surgeons took part in an operation lasting approximately 14 hours, removing the huge growth and reconstructing the damaged jaw. Surgery could never return the years he had already lost, but it offered something he had waited painfully long to regain: an easier way to eat, communicate, and take part in so-called ordinary life without that immense weight controlling every moment. Number 11. Little Ah Neath. Little Ah's first days brought the kind of fear no parent is ever prepared to face. The Cambodian baby arrived with a deep opening at the front of her head and a large swelling extending from the back of her skull. Doctors suspected anencephaly, a severe condition in which major parts of the brain and skull failed to develop properly. Her breathing remained dangerously unstable, keeping her in the hospital for 2 months with oxygen helping her stay alive. Meanwhile, her parents, Srey and Hong, were running out of everything except hope. They sold their home and land to cover medical expenses, then appealed publicly for anyone willing to help their daughter. Srey remembered crying for days after realizing how serious things were. Yet Aneeth survived long enough to leave the hospital and return to relatives in Pontiac district. Her family still hopes specialists in Phnom Penh, or perhaps overseas, can offer another possibility. Until then, every ordinary day with their daughter means something extraordinary. Number 10. Beatrice Makoha. For over 20 years, Beatrice carried a swelling on the right side of her face, while the possibility of treatment remained painfully out of reach. The woman from Kenya had a benign cystic growth that continued expanding until one nostril was completely blocked. Breathing depended on the other, and pressure near her right eye gradually began interfering with her vision. Money stood between Beatrice and the specialist care she needed, allowing years to pass while the problem became difficult to ignore. Relief finally came in 2021 at Moi Teaching and Referral Hospital. A multidisciplinary medical team undertook a 4-hour operation and removed the enormous cyst without involving her brain. What came out was amazing. The growth contained approximately 3 liters of fluid. Behind that extraordinary figure, though, was a woman who had spent more than 2 decades waiting for care that could have changed her daily existence much earlier. Number 9. Igor Vovkovinsky. Being recognized as the tallest living man sounded impressive on paper, but Igor knew the title carried a far heavier reality. A pituitary tumor caused his body to produce excessive growth hormone, eventually pushing his height to around 2.34 meters. Igor had moved from Ukraine to Rochester, Minnesota at 7 so specialists at Mayo Clinic could treat him. Height was only the visible part of what followed. Pain, limited mobility, and the strain placed on his body complicated ordinary routines, while finding clothes or size 24 footwear became surprisingly difficult. In 2010, Guinness World Records officially recognized his extraordinary height. Public attention later brought appearances in Hall Pass, television programs, and even Eurovision in 2013. Reebok also made 3 custom pairs of shoes after his struggle to find suitable footwear became widely known. Igor died from heart disease-related complications in August 2021, aged 38. Number 8. Dustin Carter. 5 years old is far too young to understand why doctors are fighting to save your life, much less why that fight will change your body forever. Dustin was that age when a dangerous blood infection forced surgeons to amputate most of his arms and legs. Growing up meant figuring out movement and daily tasks differently, but sympathy was never the future he wanted for himself. At Hillsborough High School in Ohio, wrestling caught his attention for its strategy, discipline, and fierce competition. Dustin trained beside his teammates and developed techniques that worked with his body rather than against it. By senior year, he was competing in the 103-pound division, facing opponents under the very same rules. His 2008 season carried him all the way to Ohio's Division II state wrestling tournament, with official records showing 39 victories and only 2 defeats beforehand. Reaching the quarterfinals proved something simple: Dustin belonged on that mat. Number 7. Lincoln may barely be able to move his body, but spend a little time around him, and you quickly realize just how much is happening behind those eyes. X-linked myotubular myopathy has left him almost completely paralyzed, dependent on a ventilator and round-the-clock assistance. Yet his personality refuses to disappear beneath all that medical equipment. Lincoln is witty, observant, curious, and remarkably good at reading the emotions of everyone around him. His father understands tiny signals others might miss, while his best friend Maddie simply treats him like the kid he is. Even his bed sits right in the middle of the family home because Lincoln has no interest in being tucked away from everyday life. Lessons happen there, jokes interrupt therapy, and conversations about Minecraft or science can instantly brighten his mood. Doctors once warned his family that he might not survive his first birthday. Lincoln proved that prediction spectacularly wrong. These days, he is preparing for his bar mitzvah and making sure his voice is heard. Number 6. Ariana Paige Russell. What once made Ariana Paige Russell uncomfortable eventually became the very surface of her art. Since childhood, even gentle pressure against her skin could leave bright, red, raised marks behind, sometimes accompanied by itching or heat. For years, she had no clear explanation for why her body reacted this way, and attention from curious strangers only made the experience harder. Graduate art school finally brought an answer when a dermatologist identified dermatographia, a condition in which physical pressure triggers an unusual histamine response. Ariana later noticed something fascinating while working with photography: those temporary marks could become pictures. Using blunt tools and stencils, she began tracing delicate patterns across her skin and photographing them before they faded roughly 30 minutes later. The work soon reached international exhibitions, but Ariana never treated her body as a spectacle. Instead, those disappearing lines became a deeply personal way of exploring vulnerability, emotion, and the strange stories our skin can quietly hold. Number 5. Dave Cat stopped worrying long ago about whether strangers would understand his private life. His longtime companion is Sidore, a life-size silicone doll he treats not as decoration but as his romantic partner. Their bond has lasted years, complete with shared dinners, conversations, photographs, and carefully chosen outfits. None of this happened accidentally. Dave Cat knowingly chose a form of companionship that most outsiders would find difficult to understand, and he has never pretended otherwise. Another doll eventually joined the household, making his unusual domestic world even further removed from an ordinary relationship. Mockery inevitably followed, although Dave Cat seems far more interested in explaining his choices than defending them. Human romance, with all its expectations, uncertainty, and emotional pressure, never offered the same comfort he found at home. His happiness may seem artificial to anyone looking in from outside, but Dave Cat sees something entirely different: companionship without conflict. Number 4. Weong Bunmi. Cruel strangers have called Weong a melted face monster, but there is a grandmother behind that ugly nickname, and she deserves far better. Weong, 63, has neurofibromatosis, which caused tumors to gradually spread across her face beginning in childhood. Over many years, the growths became so extensive that her features were severely distorted and her eyesight was eventually lost. Yet Weong did not disappear from society simply because others found her appearance difficult to understand. She left rural Surin for Bangkok and supported herself by selling flowers and small goods along the streets. Doctors have offered an operation, although Wiang has repeatedly hesitated for one painfully understandable reason: she fears going under anesthesia and never waking again. Medical workers continue discussing possible treatment without dismissing that fear. Meanwhile, she keeps earning her own money rather than asking strangers to support her. Wiang considers herself healthy enough to work, and that independence clearly matters. Other people see her face first. She sees a life still worth living. Number 3. Victoria Modesta Payne had followed Victoria through childhood, and 15 reconstructive operations still could not give her damaged left leg the function she desperately wanted. Growing up in Latvia, then moving to London, she gradually found herself pulled toward music, fashion, and performance, places where being different could become part of expression rather than something to conceal. At 20, after years of research and conversations with doctors, Victoria made an intensely personal decision. In 2007, she chose a below-the-knee amputation, hoping to leave behind the endless cycle of painful procedures. Rehabilitation introduced her to prosthetics, but realistic-looking limbs held little appeal. Victoria began collaborating with designers on pieces nobody would mistake for ordinary legs, crystals, glowing elements, and perhaps most famously, a dramatic black spike. These devices became part sculpture, part fashion, part stage identity. Her appearance at the London 2012 Paralympic closing ceremony later introduced millions to an artist who had turned medical necessity into her own visual language. Number 2. Mike Koech's years behind the handlebars of a motorcycle taxi were how Mike supported his family in Kenya, even as a massive ameloblastoma steadily overtook his face. The growth became so severe that he lost his left eye, while its reach toward the base of his skull made treatment dangerously complicated. Doctors in Kenya and India examined him, yet the case was considered too difficult to operate on safely. Mike could have remained trapped there, except an unexpected connection through the Red Cross eventually brought his case to Spanish surgeon Pedro Cavadas. Between 2011 and 2016, Mike traveled to Valencia for 4 major operations aimed at removing the tumor and rebuilding the damaged areas of his face. Each procedure carried uncertainty, but his health gradually improved enough for him to return to the family, depending on him. His gratitude became wonderfully personal. When Mike later welcomed a daughter, he named her Carmen, after Dr. Cavadas's mother. Well, how beautiful is it? Now let's end this with number 1. Millie K's Millie was having a drink in a hotel bar when somebody took a photograph that would outlive almost everything else known about her. The year was 1952. The place was the Peggy Bradford Hotel, and beside Millie was a 12-foot python. Rather than merely holding the animal, she calmly slipped its head into her mouth while keeping her drink in one hand. The strangest part is how casual she looks. Nobody needed curtains, music, or a dramatic introduction to make the scene bizarre enough. A few stunned drinkers and that enormous snake did the job perfectly. Swallowing snakes had appeared in sideshows before, although Millie seemed to approach it with the ease of somebody repeating a familiar routine. Very little information about her survived afterward. There are no famous interviews or detailed accounts explaining where she went next. Instead, we have that photograph. One peculiar moment in a hotel bar that kept Millie's name alive long after the evening itself disappeared. If you found this video fascinating, be sure to like it and subscribe. Thanks for watching till the end, and we'll see you soon in the next one.